Now, the festive season is synonymous with overindulging of all kinds, and this includes binge drinking. And while many are able to curb their enthusiasm to moderate drinking, binge drinking, on the other hand, is risky for many rather obvious reasons. To discuss this, we're joined by the South Africa Alcohol Policy Alliance Director, Mr. Maurice Smithers. Thank you so much for your time, and good to have you on the Daytime Update once again. If you could talk to us about the actual impact and the veracity of the use of alcohol, specifically around New Year's Eve, and how much this actually does influence the crime rate in South Africa, the accident rates in South Africa. Is it understated, or is it overstated and over-exaggerated in your knowledge and in your view?
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks for having us. And in case I don't get a chance to say this later, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you too, Maurice.
Sure. Look, I think that it's not overstated. There's no doubt that on New Year, people go crazy. I was just reading in the Sunday Times today, a little, they have this blast from the past kind of newspaper advert, a newspaper extract from 1972 this year. And it talked about New Year's Eve in 1972 in Hillbrow. And I remember being there. And that was back in the days, of course, when Hillbrow was a whites-only place. And, the streets were jam-packed. People were throwing bottles of beer from buildings, blocks of flats. There were fights happening in the street. People were rocking our car. Drunken people coming up and rocking our car. We were stuck in traffic. It was so. This happens every year, and it has happened like this for a really long time. So I don't think it's overstated, and I do think that it is actually potentially a problem this year, as it has been every other year. Not that I necessarily it will increase crime, but certainly there's a risk of interpersonal violence, and there's a risk of road traffic incidents with drunken drivers. Yeah.
What you're describing now, is this a uniquely South African phenomenon? Is this a uniquely South African overindulgence? Or do we see similar patterns throughout the world come New Year's Eve?
I think probably around the world there is excessive behavior on New Year's Eve. It has become a tradition for people to get really excited about New Year and to engage in this ritual of staying up till 12 o'clock and seeing the New Year in, and a lot of that is fueled by alcohol. I would imagine that there are parts of virtually every country in the world where alcohol is consumed, where it is actually a lot more crazy perhaps than other parts. Certainly that, like a Hillbrow kind of place is always where you've got a high density area, a night spot area where people normally gather. Times Square in New York, for example, is probably like that. I think it's a little bit safer in Times Square because the crowds are much, much bigger and it's quite well controlled, but I'm sure that there are also problems, and I'm sure that the hospitals get filled up with people who have had some kind of incident that has caused them to end up there.
Now, there's drinking and there's binge drinking. What qualifies as binge drinking?
Well, there are different views on this. People, a lot of doctors have argued over the years that 3 or 4 drinks is okay for a man, and maybe 2 or 3 drinks for a woman. Other doctors say it's the same. Others say you shouldn't be drinking at all, that no level is safe. But certainly, binge drinking is where people literally go and drink 10, 12 drinks in one night. And it's this idea that you're not having a good time if you're not actually consistently and, drinking all the time that you are out. And the longer that you're out, of course, the more you actually drink. So some people end up, like I said, having 12, 14 drinks in one night, and those can be a mix of drinks, beers and spirits and shots and so on. It can be just one kind of drink, but it's that kind of excessive drinking, that where people literally get unable to even walk properly and talk properly, but also to get to a point where they lose basic control of their ability, their judgment, their capacity to respond appropriately to situations, and that's when you then begin to have violence, and that's when you begin to have sexual violence, and that's like when people pull out their knives or pull out their guns or whatever, and get it completely out of control.
And what you're describing there, Maurice, is unfortunately an all too common scene that we behold in the streets of South Africa. Really something that has become very much of a culture of drinking and a way of drinking. How do you believe that we can turn this tide around? Are we talking about stricter laws here, or perhaps more smarter interventions need to be put in place to reverse that culture, so that even when people are drinking, they're drinking responsibly and not in a way that they completely lose control over themselves?
Yeah, look, I think it's bad habits. So you want behavior change. But behavior change is not what the liquor industry says, where you tell people they must drink responsibly, because it's not an issue of the individual. It's a societal issue. The reason why a lot of people drink in the first place is not because they want to. And by the way, we should just remember that in South Africa, only around 31% of people actually drink. People age 15 and above actually drink. So actually the vast majority of people in the country don't drink. 69% of people age 15 and above don't drink. But of those who do drink, 60% do actually drink in a dangerous way. So why do they do that? Well, it's because it's become acculturated, as you said. We grow up with advertising. We grow up seeing our parents drink. We grow up seeing and being persuaded that no celebration is possible without alcohol. And so even before the age of 18, we start to itch to drink, to want to drink. We start to feel as though we're missing out on something. So that is really what has to change. And that's why the World Health Organization argues that the three key things to do are to limit or ban alcohol advertising in the way that we did with smoking, for the exact same reason. The other is to reduce availability. And that means, limiting the number of liquor outlets that you have. It means things like changing the operating hours, not allowing places to stay open till 4 o'clock in the morning, as we have happening here in South Africa. It means increasing the age of drinking. It means even changing bottle sizes. One of the things about beer, people drink bottles of beer in South Africa which are 750 mils or a liter. Now, once you've opened a beer, you can't not drink the whole thing. It's not like wine or spirits that you can, put a cap on again and put it in the fridge or put it in your cupboard and drink it again later on. Once the beer's open, you've got to drink it. And so reducing bottle sizes would also be a good thing to do. And the third thing is to increase the price of alcohol. It's just too affordable, unfortunately, and that also encourages people to drink more. So those three key things, if those could be legislated in a smart way and introduced over a period of years, also taking into account that you would have to take steps to mitigate some of the problems that might arise from that, such as job losses, economic difficulties and so on. But there are ways of dealing with that, and society has to do that. And then the other thing is you back that up with good education and awareness programs, starting with kids at school, but reaching out to all people in society at all times. But the education on its own, which is what the liquor industry keeps arguing one should do, is simply not enough. Because if all of these other things are in place where alcohol is just so easily available and you're continually being persuaded to use it, then people are going to do it, I'm afraid.
There's something that you mentioned a bit earlier on in your response about the number of people that do drink and those who don't drink in South Africa. And I wonder if this is a problem, because the numbers that you mentioned are, you said 31% of people drink and 69% of people don't drink. I've got statistics that say only 60% of South Africans drink, meaning that 40% don't drink. Were you making reference to drinking excessively as opposed to drinking at all?
No, drinking at all. These are the World Health Organization figures which have been put together. This is from 2018. The World Health Organization Global Status Report on Alcohol and Health. And the figures that there were contributed to by Stats SA, by the South African Medical Research Council. The figure of 60% is the people who drink badly. So of the 31% that do drink, 60% drink in a dangerous way.
All right. That puts that into perspective. We also spoke about some of the ripple effects of alcohol and excessive drinking. The fact that it costs South Africa 37.9 billion rand annually, and this is as byproducts of excessive drinking. Talk to us about that and the impact that that has, and where it actually gets spent in South Africa's budget.
Well, that figure, by the way, is what they call tangible costs. The intangible costs are over 200 billion, which is 10 to 12% of GDP. So that's a very important number to know, because the liquor industry keeps arguing that they contribute 70 billion to the economy, and so, I think that's the figure that they quote. But the fact is that the cost to the country is much higher. And that cost is spread right across. I mean, it's a demand on health services. It's a drop in productivity. It's dealing with road traffic incidents. It's all of the things that have a ripple effect, a knock-on effect in our society. I mean, one example I can just give you is that last year, I think they were saying that if somebody goes into a hospital with a stab wound, a non-life-threatening stab wound, just a little nick, let's say, that needs stitches as a result of a drunken fight, they will go into a public health hospital and they will get, treated, stitched, given an injection perhaps, and sent home. That costs the public health system 5,000 rand. One person, one incident. And that comes out of our taxes. That comes out of the fiscus. Around the same time, there was a story about a guy who actually got stabbed in Cape Town, got stabbed under the arm in a drunken fight. That was a life-threatening injury. He either could have lost his arm or his life. He spent something like 4 hours in surgery and had to then stay in hospital. Now, again, the cost of that would have been probably 40, 50,000, again, to the state, because that person was using a public health facility. So if you all of those accumulative costs actually add up to this very, very unnecessary and avoidable load, economic load on our society. And if only we could find a way to get people to drink in a moderate way. We don't use the word responsibly because we don't believe you can shift that responsibility onto the individual. But if people drank in a moderate way, then we would see a reduction, a massive reduction. And, it's not impossible to achieve this. Apparently in Russia, which is quite a success story, over the last 10 to 20 years, they have managed to reduce overall consumption of alcohol by 43%. Now, that is a country that also had a drinking problem with a lot of dependency on vodka. But through introducing new measures, they actually managed to reduce the consumption. People haven't stopped drinking, and we're not saying people must stop drinking. What we are saying is that from the outset, people must have the right to choose whether to drink or not, and not be told to drink by advertising and by their friends, and when they do drink, they should have enough, perhaps what we what we're talking about is increasing people's emotional intelligence, their ability to be able to know when enough is enough, so that they don't go beyond the point where they actually lose their capacity for judgment. And that's why the whole alcohol thing has been so critical around COVID, because when people get drunk, they lose their ability to remember and to even care about observing the COVID-19 protocols. They stop wearing masks, they stop social distancing, they stop sanitizing, and then the risk of spreading the virus becomes so much greater. So I think it's very important. And I think that it's very important also to remember, and I do wish actually that maybe Newzroom Afrika or other TV stations, radio stations would stop talking to me and rather send people out into communities and talk to communities about this, because it's people, it's ordinary people living in communities, especially in precarious communities, where you'll find 10 shebeens in one street, that people are experiencing daily, in real time, the consequences of this harmful use of alcohol. It's not an academic issue. It's not an economic issue. It's an issue about people. It's an issue about human rights, and it really needs. We really would like more done to actually get those voices heard, and for you to ask the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition what are they doing about changing the legislation. The minister's been silent ever since he was appointed in May 1999.
And I must say, Mr. Smithers, you're highlighting a lot of very pertinent parts of this conversation. Certainly, a multifaceted approach that needs to be had when we have discussions about alcohol and alcohol consumption, as well as the results of alcohol consumption on our communities. We thank you so much once again for your time, and thank you for joining us on the Daytime Update. That's Mr. Maurice Smithers there. He is the Southern Africa Alcohol Policy Alliance Director. Now, when we